Welcome back, everybody. Vintage lenses have been making a big comeback lately and really started maybe a decade or so ago that we started seeing people shooting them, particularly for video. But lately they've become super popular. Today we're going to take a look at a vintage lens. There's a little controversy around it. People have called it the worst lens ever made, which I think is a little funny. But I think it has a cool vintage look, and it's something that if you're looking at vintage glass, it's still affordable and you might enjoy. A quick bit of history before we get into some sample footage. The Nikon 43-86 f3.5 was released in 1963, and it was known for not being very sharp, particularly on the wide end. And for a lot of folks, that was a deal killer then and is a deal killer now. And I know I generally like shooting with sharp glass, particularly in photography where I could soften it in post if I needed to. But there are times, recently I was helping someone with a project where they were doing a flashback sequence, and to get a dreamy look, my suggestion was to use a vintage lens and maybe a little misting to give it a different feel than the rest of the footage had. So after I saw the vintage lens crowd start to talk about this lens a few years ago, it made my list of glass that I would pick up if I could find it a good enough price. And recently, on a trip to my local camera store, I saw not one but two of these in their used case, chatted with them a little bit, and was able to get them down to a $30 price tag, and I thought that was a great deal on a lens. It's really hard to pick up any glass for cheaper than that anymore. So I took it home and shot some test footage. This is a push-pull lens with manual focus, and I use peaking in my camera to try to get it focused well. It can be a little difficult, particularly on the wide side. It's not very sharp, so you don't get a lot of feedback. It did okay in all of my test shots. So history lesson out of the way, let's look at some footage. This first scene is at a local lake at sunset, and despite my terrible panning, thanks to forgetting my good fluid head, this footage really shows how much this lens will flare with a light source pointed directly at the lens. One note, I found that while this flares very strongly with a strong light source pointed directly at it, if the light isn't particularly strong or pointed directly into the lens, I did have some struggles getting these flares, so indoors it really took a flashlight pointed directly at it to get the dramatic flaring, and then outside I had to be pointed at the sun. In studio, the flaring's a little less dramatic. This first shot is at f3.5 on the wide end. The second shot is at f8, also on the wide end. It flares not quite as dramatically as it did outside, but there's still quite a bit of flaring, and I think a really interesting look. So is this a lens that I'm actually going to keep and use? And I think the answer is yes. I don't have a lot of applications for a soft lens that flares so much, but those flares are really interesting, and I can imagine situations where shooting live video with that could be a lot of fun. And for that low investment, it's really easy to excuse having it in the lens cabinet. That's it for today. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe. Good luck in your art journey, and we'll see you next time.